Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2023 forecast with myself, Gary O'Toole. You can find me at timelineastrology.com. Let's get started by chanting for Ganesh, the Lord of Vedic astrology. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. A very simple, very concise mantra for Ganesh. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. Help us to clear the obstacles, clear our minds, and get focused. So focus, I think, would be a really important point moving into this period, but into the future in general. I think we're heading into a time where focus would be our key ally in an era of really technological advancements that I think are going to blow our minds. And so that's the downside of technology and its advancement, and that is robbing our focus. But if we can use technology, we can certainly use it to improve our lives. And just a reminder before we get into this, that 30 years ago, Saturn entered Aquarius, and that was the beginning of the internet. That was the first smartphone. Like, look where we've come in 30 years when you think about it. And now that Saturn has just entered Aquarius, again, remember, I'm using sidereal signs here. It has just entered sidereal Aquarius after 30 years, and we're stepping onto a new platform of growth in terms of technology and all kinds of scientific advancements. So just before I get into the transits, though, just a reminder that these are general transits. I'm referring to how they affect the world, not you personally necessarily, although you can extract, I'm sure, hopefully, many personal things from these general transits and apply them to your particular chart. Your birth chart and your circumstances, your location even on the planet is going to have an impact. So all of those things have to be taken into account. So the first thing I want to say is that all of the planets in February are moving forward. And that's obviously a more positive thing. Most people like to move forward. Unless you've got loads of retrograde planets in your birth chart, as in you were born when a lot of the planets were, appeared to me at least, moving backwards, you probably like to move forward and very direct motion and more expressive. Retrograde planets, unlike that, they are more internalized and hesitant and don't like that so much. So if you are, I guess, very retrograde in nature, then you might not like this current period, but it is very much about being all gung-ho and moving forward with your plans. However, I do have to say that even though all the planets are moving forward, Uranus is the last station at the end of January and is going to start to move forward in February. Planets in their station direct take a while to get out of their so-called shadow. The period that it went back over once, again retrograde, and now it's going back over a third time. So Mars in particular is one of those planets that's doing that in February, and it won't be until March, actually, well into March, that Mars gets into new territory. Mercury moves a lot faster, so it gets into new territory quite quickly. Uranus is slower, so it takes a while longer. But Mars in particular, and in sidereal Taurus, is not only a bit stuck in the mud in a way in Taurus, because it's opposite its nature. It doesn't like to be in Taurus. And although it's moving forward, at least, no longer moving backwards as it was from the end of October until the middle of January, it is still having to clear this position, this territory that it's already been over twice. And now it's the third time, and it's like, okay, I'm done with this, but I just got to get on with it. The fact that it's doing so out of bounds, as it's called, it is further north of the ecliptic. So it's this declination, as opposed to the longitude. We're talking about latitude now. It seems to be out of bounds, out of control, erratic, and a bit all over the place. And Mars feeling erratic and all over the place, but at the same time feeling bogged down, feeling stuck in Taurus, not to mention with an aspect from Saturn, a square aspect from Saturn in Aquarius now. Well, no wonder that it might be a bit frustrating for many people, and people might lash out with this, because on the one hand, you have this energy that feels like all over the place, but then on the other hand, you have this sort of limiting energy and kind of stuck feeling. So it might be a bit challenging for you to coordinate all of that. But of course, that's what needs to be done for us all. But there is a silver lining in February, and that is once Venus moves into sidereal Pisces by February 15th until March 12th. And Venus in Pisces, as well as in Taurus, these are really always the sweet spots of the year. And so this is one sweet spot in a sense during a kind of stormy period in many ways, a period where uh, things are becoming clearer. A storm is passing in many ways as well. And the analogy of a silver lining or possible, this rainbow effect, you might say, of Venus in Pisces is certainly there. So if you can imagine a day where, the weather is unpredictable and it's, been raining and the clouds are parting, and then there's that shining, the bright light shining through the clouds with a rainbow. February has that kind of quality about it. Now, Venus in Pisces this time is even more. It's even more so. It's like on steroids because it's with Neptune, which joins it in February, on February 18th, and it's entering Pisces where Jupiter has been for many months now. So we've got Venus, Neptune, and Jupiter all together in Pisces. This is almost like too much of a good thing. So we need to be mindful of that, of course, and overindulging and overdoing anything, because what could happen then is that we end up with more problems. Because while this is happening, all of these quote unquote benefic planets, Venus, Jupiter in particular, are hemmed in by so-called malefics. And that is Saturn on the one side in Aquarius and Rahu, the North Node, in Aries, either side of Pisces, where Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune are joining up. And so this, for me, kind of screams overindulgence and then, feeling a bit stuck because of that. It's like you have one drink too many and then you have a hangover and then you can't do anything kind of thing. So we need to be mindful of that. And that's, one very simple example, a very maybe minor example of overindulgence. There could be a lot more, expressions of this. One very worrisome expression of Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune, more especially in Pisces, and then hemmed in between Saturn and the North Node Rahu, is chemical warfare and those kinds of expressions in the more extreme way. That would be the more worrisome, I would say. But again, maybe for us personally, we just might want to trip out, might want to just tune out what's going on in the world, might feel a bit overwhelmed by everything and want to just enjoy ourselves. And we might overdo that enjoyment. And then we might feel a bit like, stuck in that. The other thing, like I said, is that Saturn has moved into Aquarius, but the sun also moves into Aquarius by mid-February. Every February, on February 12th, the sun moves into sidereal Aquarius. So Saturn is combust. Saturn is not visible. And leading up to the new moon, which I'll talk about now in a minute, on February 20th, we have Saturn exactly combust, right? So it's completely burnt up in a sense. When planets are combust, they're angry. We can't see them, so we can't see the significations of the planet, in this case, Saturn, which is all about structure. And the way I'm reading this is that basically we are now in a new age of technology, but the technology itself is just sort of teetering on the edge. It's not really there yet, and we don't know how to use it anyway, even if it were. And this is Saturn combust in Aquarius. It's like there's new technologies that are now being sort of like pushed out, talked about by everyone online, it seems, these days. But it's like it's confusing. We don't really know how to use them and how do we implement them anyway, and what good are they, and what will it do to society in the future? And you've got all of these kinds of indications going on, and it's confusing. So when you add this to everything else that's going on and this kind of need to kind of check out on some level and overindulge, there could be, something to be mindful here of for sure in terms of any kind of disappearing down any rabbit hole or allowing your mind to veer off too much into the future, and especially if it's a dystopian future in your mind. So the other thing, like I said, is that Neptune is also moving into Pisces. Jupiter's already been there for a few months. Venus is going to move in, and then followed by Neptune a few days later. So by the end of February, we have all of these planets, Venus, Neptune, and Jupiter in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces is interesting because what I get a sense of more than anything is that February is like a beginning of 2023, sort of, it's like a painter coming to the canvas and sort of like splodging on lots of different colors. And it's like an abstract painting that hasn't even really been finished. And it's kind of like it's taking some form, it's taking some shape, but it's actually not really formed completely yet. So in other words, February is kind of like this month of we're not really quite there yet. We don't really know how this is all going to pan out, as in the year. But it's starting to take shape. Things are starting to blend together. And that is largely because, as well, of what's happening on either side of Pisces, not just Neptune and Pisces, which can make things confusing, but Saturn in Aquarius is strongly aspecting Rahu, the North Node, and Uranus in Aries. So they're in actually a more friendly relationship. They're in a sextile. So up to this point, since 2020, we had Saturn and Uranus in a square, and they weren't mixing well at all. But now at least they're starting to mix, they're starting to blend, and there's possibility coming from this. But as they blend, as they mix, and we try and make these things work, we have in between all of this Neptune and Pisces making things quite confusing. So again, it's like an abstract painting. It's just not even clear about what it is yet. It hasn't been completed yet. We don't really know how it's all going to pan out as yet. Just like technologies that we try and implement into our lives, or any kind of technology, any system that we wish to implement in our own lives, is not quite clear as yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there. The other thing that I think is going to make February and the next few months really a bit confusing is this dynamic here where Rahu, the North Node, is in Ashwini now in February from February 21st until October 30th this year. But Ketu, the South Node, has already transited through Swati, and it will continue until June 26th this year. So it's been there since October 18th last year. So that means that from February 21st to June 26th this year, 2023, we have Rahu in a lunar mansion Ashwini that is associated with Ketu, and Ketu in Swati, which is associated with Rahu. In other words, they're in each other's space in many ways, with Rahu in Aries and Ketu in Libra. And so that's quite complicated because it kind of reverse roles everything. You're trying to like going to the future and try and progress, and then it points you to the past. You try and figure out the past, and then it points you back to the future. It's this like Ouroboros image here is really the best depiction of what goes on with the nodes anyway, but especially when they're in each other's lunar mansions. It gets quite confusing. But the other, I guess, more positive expression of that is that we kind of can wrap it all up in a nice tight bow, in a sense. We understand that the future is the past and the past is the future. And though that might sound like a completely ridiculous statement, anyone who has this combination in their birth chart will know what I'm referring to. That when you start delving into it anyway, you realize actually that there are always repeating patterns over and over, and we're just repeating patterns on a larger scale over and over and over again, and even in our own lives over and over. And so this might period from February to June might feel a bit sort of fated in many ways. It might feel like things are out of control in many other ways. And one of the downsides I would say about this is anytime the nodes are in each other's lunar mansions, there could be some issues that feel more uncertain and create a lot of vulnerability in the world. And, you know, the war situation is just one of them. I think more virus and all of that, and the outbreak of the virus, maybe even mutations of the virus could be another one. But just generally a sense of confusion and uncertainty, and where do we go from here, and kind of caught in a loop and not really knowing how to get out of this kind of conundrum that we find ourselves in now. So this is a dynamic that's going on right to June. But even then, by June, what's interesting then is that as soon as the nodes move to 6 degrees of Aries and Libra, they also then enter Aries and Libra in the tropical zodiac, which you'll hear a lot about from Western astrologers from the summer onwards, and re-emphasis and a doubling up really of Rahu in Aries, Ketu in Libra. And what is the theme of that? It's basically overemphasizing the self and the freedom, the need for freedom, push for war, and then the neglect of fairness, equality, and compromise, negotiation. And that's leading obviously to a war situation. This is one of the signatures of war. So we have to be mindful of that it's adding kind of further complexity during this period from February to June, but even further on into the end of the year. as the nodes continue through Aries and Libra, sidereal Aries and Libra at any rate until the end of October, October 30th. So that's the nodes. Let me just go through quickly the lunar phases. So you have the full moon on February 5th. That's in sidereal Cancer. This is the lunar mansion called Ashlesha, the end of sidereal Cancer. And then we have a new moon on February 20th in Shatabishaj, which is the 100 healers in sidereal Aquarius. Let's first go to the full moon. So this is a full moon to help us balance the outer and the inner, our private with our public life, our, more personal life with our career objectives and the world out there. So this always happens anyway when the moon is opposite the sun in Capricorn, the moon in Cancer. And then it's about getting the life work balance correct, really. Of course, it'll play out in more individual ways for each person, but that's the general theme. We're really focused on now this kind of broader perspective, long haul through Capricorn and Aquarius, with the sun moving through these two Saturn signs, with Saturn now in Aquarius. And we're all about making it work now and plodding along and trying to get it to work, putting in new systems in place for the new year. That's the kind of big themes. But if we don't balance that with kind of downtime at home and enjoying ourselves and maybe even taking a break now and then we're not really living balanced lives. And the full moon always comes along to give us more of that balance. So that's the full moon. It's in Ashlesha. It's very much about clingingness. Another translation of Ashlesha is the embrace. And one of the symbols is a coiled serpent. It's literally ruled by the divine serpents, the Sarpas. And so we see here the quality of embrace and how that can be good or bad, depending. It could be this sense of healthy attachment, but it could also be a very unhealthy attachment and codependency. But it could also be used in a way to help us understand what we're attached to, the thoughts that we are attached to, our likes and dislikes, and are they healthy? Are likes healthy? What are we attached to? Who are we attached to? These are some of the big themes of a full moon in Ashlesha. So that's the full moon. Let me bring it to the new moon then on February 20th in Shatabishaj. This is the 100 healers. This is a lunar mansion found in the middle of sidereal Aquarius. The new moon is at 7 degrees of Aquarius, and Saturn is not far behind at 4 degrees. So this is a very Saturn-like new moon, of course. Saturn is the co-ruler of Aquarius with Rahu, the other ruler, in Aries. So, the theme of this new lunar month coming up from February 20th is really, I guess, a more obvious instigation of these kind of new technological advancements and also any kind of new healthcare, anything being implemented there in the next month into the end of February and the beginning of March. We're going to see, likely some movement on that. But personally, it's also about, having a kind of downtime and retreat always for the new moon, to withdraw from the world out there, to reset and recalibrate ourselves and our intentions around this new month. And a lot of that will be resetting our intentions around what we need to do to make us healthy, to make us well. Because Shatabishaj 100 healers, it's not just about physical health, it's actually more about mental health. What do we need to do to be well mentally? And like I said at the beginning of this, one of the key things that we're going to have to really focus on is focus itself. Without focus, I think that the future of all of these transits, what they suggest is that our focus is being robbed left, right, and center, and it's just going to become more and more extreme. So actually, to be well mentally, we need to cultivate focus more than anything else. This 100 stars, this 100 healers, the Shatabishaj in Aquarius is just so diffuse and confusing in another way, because there's just so many things coming at us all at once. And we need to be able to direct our attention. And this is the time, I think, to think about these things for the upcoming lunar month from the end of February. So that is Shatabishaj, that is the new moon, and that is my forecast for February 2023. I'll release a more updated and a more in-depth report, a written report for patrons if you want to become a patron. And of course, I'll keep patrons updated throughout the month. If you want to join, you can go to patreon.com/timeline astrology, or just go to timelineastrology.com. At least give the video a thumbs up and a like and subscribe, all of that, and I'll appreciate that. And thank you for listening. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time.